All right. Hi again, everybody. I believe we're recording. I have no clue if we're doing this correctly, but I think we are. So not knowing how long we had you before everything messed up, we're just going to start from the beginning all over again. And let me check we're screen sharing. I believe we're recording. Let me just double check. Yes. Okay. So once again, we're just going to thank you for letting us be here despite our multiple mess up attempts. We had asked how COVID has changed your life, and we talked about fear of exposure, not only for you, but your family being worried about you getting sick, but them, of course, some of us are more worried about them getting sick than ourselves. Financial insecurity, which you may have experience with already, layoffs and furloughs and uncertainty about what's happening to your business. Sam, being an entrepreneur, he made it very clear that if you're not at work, you're not making money. And Mary and I remember being in that position when we were in private practice and being very worried about it when we got sick or something happened like that. Social isolation, not only from other people, because we can't go out and meet at a restaurant. We can't, here in the States, there was a long time we couldn't even meet people in a park or anywhere, and the streets and roads were desolate. But sometimes, you may have heard this part, we get isolated from our own family. I mentioned that where I work now, we train young physicians, and these physicians rotate through our hospital, Cape Fear Valley Hospital. And if they see COVID patients, they then have to quarantine themselves from their own family for 2 weeks. So a lot of these young physicians are living in their basements or in their garages while their families are gathering together upstairs. Feelings of helplessness, because we can influence none of this, which is very frustrating. And frustration is an umbrella emotion. Frustration and feelings of helplessness cause a lot of things: anger, depression, anxiety. We don't like not having control, but that's exactly what has happened during this pandemic. Disruption of normal life and routine because schools are closed, some of us who are not going to the office or going to where we usually work, we've got to figure out how to shoehorn some kind of schedule or some kind of routine or regularity into our daily lives. And we'll talk more about that in a second. Inability to de-stress the way we used to. I hope you heard us when we were live that one of our favorite ways to de-stress is coming to Jamaica, but we can't do that because we can't get on an airplane. But we love going to the gym. We love going on trips. For a long time, we've been unable to do that. We were riding our bicycles, but everyone wears a mask. We've been out on a kayak. That seems to work because we can stay half a mile away from everybody, but sometimes that's not as much fun. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, if you were live, there's not all stress is bad. Distress is the kind of stress we usually think about, the bad kind. However, there's another kind of stress. It's called eustress. Eustress is the good kind of stress you experience for happy things, like we're about to have a baby, or we have to plan a wedding, or I just got a promotion and I'm excited about it, but really scared. So good things cause stress too. Usually stress is in limited amounts is really good for us. It makes us more alert and vigilant and diligent on the things we do. But when it gets too much, there's a law of diminishing returns where stress starts to work against us. And that's when it's chronic, when it's there all the time and it's unrelenting. If you do nothing about that, it may escalate into mental illness, like a mood disorder, a depressive episode, or an anxiety disorder. So stress, chronic stress, not good. How has the pandemic increased the risk of stress and all the related problems? So here's a quote from our friends at the CDC. At least here in the States, what the CDC says is that researchers found that the amount of adults with recent symptoms of an anxiety or depressive disorder increased, oh my goodness, from 36.4 to 41.5%, while the percentage of individuals reporting unmet healthcare needs, in other words, people who never had a mental health problem before, and suddenly they do, but they don't have a therapist, they don't have a psychiatrist, psychologist, or any other way to get help, because they're stuck at home, increased from 9.2 to 11.7 between August 2020, which was, about halfway through the pandemic, and February of 2021 due to the pandemic. So that's the United States. What about Jamaica? The American Psychological Association actually has a section devoted to Jamaica, so you're welcome for that. It says that in 2019, Jamaica ranked 11th on the World Happiness Index. Believe it or not, there's a World Happiness Index. It uses a number of different factors like opportunities for recreation, care for the elderly, job opportunities, cost of living, wraps them all up and analyzes them. In 2019, Jamaica ranked 11th in the world because you're so happy. However, local research conducted in 2010 suggested that approximately 40% of your citizens are living with personality disorder features. So if we ignore these realities, we're in some serious trouble. You read the disconnect there. How come in 20%, there were 40% of people in 2010, 40% of your people were having serious problems, yet in 2019, 9 years later, you're the 11th happiest country in the world. What's up with that? Is it your incurably optimistic attitude and listening to reggae all the time and having access to Red Stripe beer? Those would be my guesses. However, this same article answered the question, what is it about the fabric of Jamaican society that allows Jamaican people to smile through the pain, the fear, and the anxiety, and care for the well-being and that of others? Historically, we've paid scant regard to mental illness as a nation, excuse me, and persons become alienated by families or stigmatized by the communities, which have only served to magnify the problem. So to break that down, that just means you don't pay as much attention to mental health problems, partly because to have a mental illness is stigmatizing. So what they're saying is that 11th happiest country in the world is kind of a false, a false projection of a country's resistance to dealing with mental health problems. So you had told this to us when we visited. Most Jamaicans just don't like to acknowledge mental health issues, and believe us, we've seen that in other countries as well. Fortunately, it appears that someone is trying to do something about it in Jamaica. So in delivering his message for World Mental Health Day, which was observed on October 10th, Portfolio Minister, Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton. Now, I'd like to know at this point, because we're doctors too, if we were in Jamaica, would we be called honorable? Because if so, I think we're going to move there like tomorrow. He said that a number of Jamaicans are struggling with depression, and there are elevated levels of anxiety and stress among the population. No specific statistics yet, just an acknowledgement that things are getting worse. He noted that the emergence of conditions such as acute psychosis, adjustment disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and protracted grief reactions, of course, with all the death, appear to be on the rise. It is in this regard, he said, that the ministry recently launched its COVID-19 mental health response program, which will provide community-based support and ease of access to mental health services. Not only do I hope that you knew about this program, but that you've seen evidence of it having a positive impact on the Jamaican people. So what's been the impact on productivity? Excuse me, as I mentioned, when we were live, it's pollen season in the southern United States, so I'm getting choked on that. What's been the impact of productivity in the workplace? This is interesting as well. Listen to this. We've seen 41% increase in overall productivity. This is the United States. 20% increase in internal collaboration time. And interestingly, 19% increase in external meeting time. The Unilever Group CEO, Alan Jope, proclaimed on the company's second quarter earnings call. And I think as a result of all that, we've seen record levels in employee engagement. In fact, our employee well-being scores up by 14%. What? Does this pandemic seem to be increasing productivity? If so, why would that be? Well, you don't have to commute to work. You can get on Zoom anytime. You can have meetings at various times. People are more engaged with their coworkers because they have to be, they've got nothing else to do. However, it's at a cost, this increase in productivity in the United States. Dig below the surface, and there's increasing evidence that while most people are delivering from the home office, it's taken a toll on them emotionally as interpersonal contact diminishes and the pandemic recession builds anxiety about job security. There's also reasonable probability that some of the productivity gains being measured by employers do not actually exist. In other words, who saw that coming? Executives in the United States putting a positive spin on things. So we're going to use as an example of this phenomenon. One of our kids, actually all of our kids, our 3 children who are now adults and have their own families, have been stuck at home for over a year doing their various jobs. Our second child, our son, Robbie, is a civil rights attorney. He actually works for the state of Georgia, defending the state of Georgia from civil rights lawsuits. The poor guy, because the courts are closed, his work has increased because they can't get into court to adjudicate these cases. Or they're stacking up because some of the attorneys in his department just can't work because they've been sick. So this poor dude, not only is he working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, but there he is stuck at home. They can't go into their office. He's stuck at home with his 2 little kids. They're about to have a 3rd child, with his 2 little kids, and having to tell them, look, I can't talk to you right now. Daddy's at work, even though he's right there in their presence. So this has been very difficult for him, and I know he's not the only one. So yeah, he's had to be more productive. He has been more productive, but it's been at a significant cost. And I know some of y'all are going through the same thing. There's always hope, though, of course, especially if we're disciples. And one thing I want to make clear, and this is from almost 40 years of experience in the world of mental health, Christians, faithful followers of Jesus, always fare better than people in the world when it comes to stress and catastrophic events. Why? Well, by virtue of their convictions and their faith, their faith community, they're more resilient and have a better prognosis than those who don't follow God. One of the things we're going to talk about in a second is one of the evidence-based treatments for COVID burnout is connection with other people. That's one thing we always have as disciples. We know that God is sovereign over everything, even little viruses. So Christians know this isn't for nothing. This isn't just a random thing. So we can have hope. We're not like those who are truly hopeless, where they're saying there's no way to get out of this. There's no one or nothing that can save me. This is the most important thing, in my opinion. Disciples know how to reframe stress. In other words, non-Christians, when they get stressed out, they see no value in it. It's troubling. It's nothing but an imposition. Christians are masters, hopefully, at reframing stress as an opportunity, because we read the Bible. The Bible says when you're under stress, that's your opportunity to deepen in faith, to grow in character, and understand Jesus a little better because he went through stress and agony and hard times. So we see this as serving a purpose, not just as a random, purposeless event. Disciples already do some of the things we'll talk about in a second that are frequently recommended for mitigating stress. For example, as I just mentioned, maintaining connections with others and avoiding unhealthy coping behaviors like resorting to drugs or alcohol when you're stressed out. Now, speaking of hope, let me now turn this over to Mary.
I was asked several weeks ago to do a women's midweek for another church on hope was the topic. And of course, being a psychologist, the first thing I did is started looking up, is there any research on hope? And come to find out, after being a psychologist for 40 years, there's an entire branch of psychology that is devoted to looking at hope and how it affects us. There's a researcher by the name of Charles Snyder, and he developed what he calls hope theory. And I did a little bit of reading on this, and I thought it was very timely what they were talking about. And so I wanted to share some of it with you today. Let me give you Dr. Snyder's definition for hope. He says, it is a positive cognitive state based on a sense of successful goal-directed determination and planning to meet these goals. Now, of course, he threw a lot of big psychological words in there because, as psychologists, we know that the more syllables we have in a word, the more we can charge for it. But I want to unpack it a little bit because I think there's some very useful concepts in this hope theory. One of the things this theory talks about is that human beings are the only creatures that are able to project their thoughts into the future. My cat, who's currently laying under the table right on top of our feet, she's not worried about next week or next month or even dinner time. She's not going to worry about dinner time until it starts to be 5 o'clock. But human beings have this ability to project ourselves into the future and to think about what the future is going to be like. And there are what this research indicates is there are 3 different ways of thinking about the future, that we think about the future. The first is fantasizing. And that's when I go by the billboard that says how many millions of dollars are in the state lottery. And I fantasize about what I would do with that money if I won the lottery. Now, the fact is I have never in my life ever bought a lottery ticket. So I'm not going to win that bazillion dollars that's on the billboard, but I think about it, and we've all got fantasies like that are not connected to reality. The second way of thinking about the future is dwelling or worrying. And oh my gosh, how much time do we spend on this? This is why the Bible constantly tells us, do not worry, pray about it. Do not worry over and over again, because we get so easily engaged in this. This is when we think about the future and we hyper focus on all the terrible things that could happen. I'm definitely going to get COVID, and I'm definitely going to lose my job, and I'm definitely not going to have a place to live. And we Satan loves to take us down that road, doesn't he? So that's one way of thinking about the future. Hoping, which is the third way of thinking about the future, is kind of a balance between fantasizing and worrying. And this is when we have exciting thoughts about what the future can be like, but we acknowledge the challenges that lay before us. According to hope theory, this is the only productive type of future thinking, is when we're hoping. I'm just going to go through real quickly what hope does for us, what this research indicates that hope does for us. And it's really interesting. People that are more hopeful do better in school. They graduate more often. They have higher grade point averages. Employees who are hopeful are more productive on the job than employees who have low hope. There are better health outcomes for people that are hopeful. And what the research indicates is that people that are hopeful do things like exercise regularly and eat a healthier diet than people who have no hope. Even for people who have chronic illnesses, hope they tend to live longer if they're more hopeful. So it even affects our longevity. So hope is super important. It obviously built us to be hopeful people. So how do we become more hopeful? Let's get to some of the practicals. What this research indicates is that there are kind of 3 steps to becoming more hopeful. The first is that you set a goal. You set something that, I like the arrows and the target. You set something that you want to aim for. What do I want to see happen in this next year? What is something I want to change in this next year? And it could be something kind of small, like I want to exercise more regularly, or it could be something more impactful, like I want to master a new job skill. That's what you all are talking about this whole day. Or I want to change careers. But you make a specific goal and you define it within as much detail as you possibly can. Then this research talks about agency. And what this is you have to ask yourself, okay, what are the specific steps I'm going to need to take to get to this goal? The research indicates that people who answered specific questions like, when am I going to get started? And I'm going to start next week trying to figure out how to master this job skill. I'm going to look at some classes that I can take online. I'm going to find somebody that can mentor me, that we're talking about mentors. I'm going to figure out, and I'm going to make a specific time to get started on this. And what the research indicates is that people that set up these specific steps were more successful at reaching their goals than people that didn't do the specific steps. And the last one is pathways. And this is when you figure out, okay, what is this realistically going to take for me to do this? How much money am I going to have to lay out to develop a new job skill? What kind of resources can I call on? Who are people that can encourage me and make sure that I follow through on this and hold me accountable to this? And this is where you face the obstacles. In any time we're trying to master something or reach a goal, there's going to be obstacles along the way. And so we figure out, okay, this is my plan A, but if that doesn't work out, what is my plan B and my plan C? Let me just use exercise as an illustration because it's very easy to illustrate this. If I want to be exercising more regularly, first I got to figure out, okay, what type of exercise am I going to do? I like to take walks, long walks. But what do I do on the days that it rains or the weather isn't I can't do it because of the weather? Then what is my plan B? What am I going to do instead of walking on that day to still reach my goal of regularly exercising? And who can do it with me? I walk with a couple of sisters, and I'm much more likely to meet the sister at the park and take my walk if we've already preset this date than if I'm just by myself and saying, maybe I'll do it at 3 o'clock or maybe I'll do it at 5 o'clock. So who can help me to reach this goal? This type of specific planning, this hopeful planning, is very different than just wishful thinking, and it can produce some real results.
So now that my wife has been very practical, let's talk about more practicals, how to deal with this pandemic. She's talked about being hopeful, which is exceedingly important. And I talked about adhering to your faith, exceedingly important. Now, as scientists, we're applied scientists, we don't do anything without proof that it works. So I found some research that came out really quickly after the pandemic was officially declared. They did a number of studies on what coping techniques and activities are most helpful. So I listed them here. I found this in an article. This is from the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine. And Colin, if you're listening to this, here's another colonial misspelling of a word center, but that just teaches you that the Center of Evidence-Based Medicine is in the United Kingdom. So this is what they came up with. And these are a number of documents recommending this approach. So in other words, 6 research studies, for example, found that minimizing the amount of media exposure is very important. You do. If it was left to me, I would listen to the news all the time. My poor wife can only tolerate so much. So we have an agreement, and on our way home, we commute together. I'm allowed to listen to one news cycle on NPR, National Public Radio. For our patients and friends, we recommend 1 hour per day of keeping in touch with what's going on, and then get off the TV and social media. Use trusted sources to access information about the pandemic. My goodness, I don't need to tell you, there's been so much misrepresentation of what's going on, so many agendas riding on the back of this pandemic. You have to find someone you trust, a non-political, non-biased entity. Once again, when it comes down to stuff like that, we're all about the CDC, our buddies at the CDC. Nothing but love for them. We recommend them for good research. Connect with friends and family online and via telephone. Much as Zoom has frustrated Mary and I for the last hour and a half, at least it exists. So we can still do things like this. We can still I'm sure your churches have gone to Zoom midweeks and so forth. That's really great. That really, if you're worried about your family in another region or state or country, this is the first time in human history we can get in touch with them across the globe and reassure ourselves, connect. That's very important. And the research continues to support that. Help and support others in the community. Stop dwelling on yourself and your own misery. This is a key factor to having a positive outlook. We use the example, as I mentioned, when we were live, Mary and I now live in a townhome. So it's a multi-dwelling thing where lots of families are squished together. And we have an alleyway out back of our home. And when the pandemic started and we were all on lockdown, a funny thing happened. All of our neighbors started moving their lawn chairs out into this alleyway. And a lot of us have porches or decks that overlook this alleyway. So all of a sudden we're out there with our beers and whatnot, and someone puts out some speakers with music going. And we connect with other people and we're helping each other, asking, what do you need? Can we go to the grocery store for you? We saw neighbors. Oh my goodness, yes, the distribution, neighborhood-wide distribution of toilet paper. So helping someone else when you're in the midst of misery is a great way to feel better about what's going on. Practice meditation and mindfulness. In the world of psychotherapy, meditation and mindfulness are very important techniques. It takes a while to teach them, so we're not going to do that today. The moral of the story is, in mindfulness therapy, we teach people to stop worrying about the past. It's already been done, can't do anything about it. Stop worrying about the future. It isn't here yet. You can't affect it right now. In mindfulness therapy, you get people to focus on being in the moment in every way, with their senses, with their minds, with their emotions. And if they have a worrisome thought, we teach them, don't get upset about having the worrisome thought. Just let it pass by. What gets people into a snowball of anxiety is they're trying to calm themselves down and they say, ooh, but I just had another anxious thought. I'm not supposed to do that. And they get more anxious. So fine, if you have an anxious thought, let it pass through and say, that's interesting, but I'm not going to get upset about it. I think I invented this, I'm pretty sure I did, a little tiny, without making you guys go to therapy, 4-step plan of brief mindfulness. So if you feel yourself getting anxious, stop, I call it. That's the acronym. The S stands for stop, what you're doing. T, take a few deep breaths. In all meditation and mindfulness therapy, breathing is very important. Count of 3, in through the nose, out through the mouth. O, observe your body. Where am I feeling tense? I personally, when I get tense, it goes right to my shoulders like that. So I have to say, okay, I have to inspect my body. There's that tension again. I'm going to try to relax. And P, which is proceed on a logical path. What can I do right now? Maybe nothing. If I can do nothing about this right now, I'm going to stop worrying about it. If there is a thing I can do right now, I'm going to do it right now. Don't worry about the past, what I didn't do back then. Don't worry about the future. It isn't here yet. Super important during this time, look after your own body. Some of you, if you're like us, you're stuck at home, your work schedule's off, or you've been furloughed. So what do? You eat for comfort, or you watch Netflix or movies all the time, as obviously we've done. Don't do that. You have to look after your body, continue to eat healthy, implement sleep hygiene, which is getting to bed at a reasonable time and up at a reasonable time, even though you don't have to. I'm not going to work right now. I don't have to be there at 9 and leave at 5. Too bad. Stay on that schedule. It will be very important for you to maintain a regular schedule, even if it's different from what was pre-pandemic. So come up with a schedule. I'm going to get up at 8 o'clock every day. From not 8 to 8:30, I'm going to have my quiet time, or 8 to 9. At this hour, I'm going to exercise. From this hour to this hour, I'm going to do my work. From this hour to this hour, I'm going to spend time with my family. It's super important to establish a routine, regular schedule during this very unpredictable and unroutine time. Come up with a new normal, we say. Avoid unhealthy coping strategies like alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. I did a little research because I was curious. Everyone's asking, is the rate of alcohol and drug abuse increasing during this time? If you go by sales of liquor, that's a definite yes. Now look here. Tequila, up 75% since the start of tequila sales in the United States, up 75%. Wine, up 66%. My guess is the quality has simultaneously gone down while the quantity has gone up. Canned cocktails, I didn't even know what those were, but apparently there are things like hard ciders and, margarita pre-mixed. I don't know what they are, but they're selling 93% more of them. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, as Sam was talking about, I recommend you go into liquor sales. This I thought was really funny because, as you know, the COVID pandemic was caused by the coronavirus. Yet Corona beer, which is a Mexican beer, who I was certain was going to change their name, even they, with that terrible name, up 50%. Online sales of booze, because you can't go out and buy it anymore, up 243%. So go into liquor distribution. That's my recommendation. And lastly, do activities you enjoy, not inactive activities. Sitting and playing video games is not good for your emotional state or your body. So activities you enjoy that you may have shelved because you're so miserable about the pandemic. Even if it's hobbies you used to do. So many people tell us, I used to do this or that. Why don't you do it anymore? Why don't I have time? Well, you probably have time now. So do things that are, God gives us hobbies, I always say, as a chance to restore ourselves. So, as long as you're not a hobby raising, your hobby isn't culturing viruses or something, find something that's good to do and continue to do it. I ride my motorcycle, as a lot of you know, perfect social distancing activity because I can be away from all society for a long period of time in a pretty quick stretch. So those are some more practicals. If none of those work, when do you seek professional help? Well, when you become vegetative. So mood disorders, as we've told y'all, depression is always accompanied by definition by vegetative symptoms. That's when you don't have any energy. When you have anhedonia, which is losing joy in things you used to find pleasurable. When you're sleeping too much or too little. When you're crying all the time, sometimes for no apparent reason. And certainly when you're experiencing suicidal thoughts. We're all hopeless and helpless right now. A problem in the world of psychiatry, a problem only becomes a problem when it interferes with something. So when this is interfering with your daily life, your management of your family, you go into the job that you do have, or caring for yourself, that's when you seek professional help. As I mentioned, suicidal thoughts, even if they're passive, like if the world's going to continue this way, I just don't want to exist anymore. I just wish the virus would take me now. That's called a passive suicidal thought. I want to seek help. Family relationships begin to suffer when you're just so stewing in your own grief and worry that you're neglecting your family. But lastly, and most importantly, remember who is in control. Psalm 38. The eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him. That's us. On those whose hope is in his unfailing love, not in vaccines or economic recovery and politics, although God puts those things in place. He is ultimately sovereign and in charge. And Mary and I, in our prayers together, we thank him for that pretty routinely. Psalm 62, yes, my soul find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he's my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. You'll be tempted to be shaken, and you'll go through some shaky emotional moments. But remember who's sovereign. Remember who has you in the palm of his hand, and we'll get through this. So I hope that this has been helpful. Because of our current technological limitations, we will not be able to take questions. However, when you receive this video file and you view it, if you have questions, feel free to email them. There are email addresses at the bottom. Please use those emails sparingly. Those are our personal email addresses, our work email addresses. So we invite questions. And thank you for putting up with our internet instability. And right now I'm going to try to sign off and stop recording. If I fail to stop this recording correctly, you may see us brush our teeth, clean the dishes, or vacuum the floor. Just be patient. So thank you again. Mary, if you want to say goodbye.
Yeah, bye.
All right. Bye, everybody. Take
Bye.
care.